All right, time for a weekly outlook. So we already got some crazy moves yesterday. Some headlines, some tariff deals. Well, not really a deal, but an extension rather. Into July. I think what the previous deadline was 1st of June, I believe. But anyway, we'll get started. So most of last week was kind of just consolidation. Uh, and well, a little bit of down, right? And we're kind of now in this balance. Um, I didn't want to like say I expected we'd put in a balance. Um, if anything, the balance was going to be sort of here, and ES a little relative weakness there, so kind of gave us a partial gap fill, right? And NQ not quite. Was a stronger one and didn't really even take out that low from 2 weeks ago. So still, look at the bigger picture. Still technically sort of up in this balance here, or prior balance here. Right? If you're looking at the profile, like it's sort of have that as the balance. Maybe you can argue that it's like this up here. This up here sort of makes sense only because that was your election day and you had some really important pivots. Pivot highs there, pivot low there, pivot, attempt at a pivot low there, pivot high there, pivot low. It's still holding that, so in that regard, good. I guess looks pretty darn decent. Really, it's really this like gap that's essentially holding everything together. So as long as that doesn't fill and we don't start accepting below it, accepting into this balance below us, I feel like you just continue being bullish. That's sort of the I think the take I'm gonna go with. NQs looks a little different. Essentially the same thing. You got your election gap there. Pivot high there, pivot low there, or pivot high there, pivot low there, pivot high there. Have your decent gap, pretty huge gap. You got your EMAs, at least your bigger ones, the 100 and the 50, sort of kind of curling back up within. So goal for, I know we discussed this yesterday, so don't think it's like Heinz. I haven't changed the levels, and I don't think I'm going to change any of them. We discussed this yesterday in the morning before we opened up on Sunday. How with this balance above us, or the range we've established above us, let me do this just so it's easier. Right, we sort of had one main distribution, at least on ES. On NQ was sort of like one big one up here. I'd argue that we had two. One main distribution up here. And then we had that one that was, what, 2 Mondays ago? That ended up holding this upper end of the balance, the prior balance, and working higher, right? Once we got the breakdown, once we broke away from this, and we established value below what we did the last 2 weeks, it became a little bit of an issue. Right? You ended the one time framing up on the daily, started the one time framing down. And then the following session you did what sellers really wanted to do. You didn't really get a breakdown per se, but you overlapped value and shifted it lower. All right, so once you got that, it became a little bit of an issue. Did I still expect we'd sort of like attempt to put in a balance within this like 2 week range? Yes, but it relied heavily on us kind of like holding this lower end. Did it necessarily hold it that session? No, but at the end of the session, we sort of established value above it, right? So looks pretty decent in that regard. Sort of at a double. I know this one a little lower. think it was like down to like 60 or 70 pre-market. But you had a double distribution there up against that Monday's little excess. We also we had this as a significant level only because we had this level here in the past. This was simply just your past little pivot high or close to past couple pivot lows. So we had that as a significant level. Once we saw that excess get established in the morning, we initiated swing longs even after the gap up. Now that we're back at that same level, and you get this double distribution, okay, you go, okay, so if we're going to stay, if we're going to be below this, pretty big issue, right? You're probably going to go attempt to go fill the gap, right? At least go see this shelf here. So it's either that or we held this, which it did, held 58.16 and worked higher, right? With the first main target being the lower end of these two sessions, right? Putting us 58.55, and I think 58.55 held for the most part. Held on pretty well, and now kind of working towards that point of control from this balance above us. Right, so if we merge all this together, now we have that, right? And I know that doesn't really help. Once you merge it all together, it sort of like makes this the bulk of the balance, right? Missing a little bit of excess up here potentially. So, and NQ essentially looks the same thing. We'll discuss sort of what we want to see on ES now. We saw what I wanted to see to start the week. We've moved quite a ways. Now, what do you want to see? We want to be holding on to ideally this 55 area. I think that's low as I want it to go. Oh. Did not mean to do that. Okay. I probably don't want it going back below the lower end of these this Wednesday, Thursday range. And I said yesterday I didn't want to be long if we were trading below 58.16. I would have been okay attempting longs on NQ. I think NQ structure below looked a little better. Actually, no, they did not. I didn't want to be long like any of them. Had we worked below, whether it was yesterday, today, tomorrow, and rest of the week. Maybe at the gap fill, but anything below that, it's as a permeable, it becomes really, really tough for me to like really press longs. Same thing on NQ now that we're up here. I can sort of discuss what happened yesterday. A little bit of what happened last week. NQ, similar thing, although relatively strong. So you had this huge set of this opening drive and a big set of singles last week or 2 weeks ago, and they had most of their value established up here. Once you broke that down on this Wednesday and the following session, Thursday, kind of overlapped to lower, right? Most of it stayed below this. Became a bit of an issue. Get the news in the morning, pre-market, that takes you lower. Ends up holding, I believe that, what was it, this 760s that we got long off of, which was the excess from like 2 Mondays ago, the lower end here. Held that, established most of its value above this, so looked good in that regard. Now the question was, okay, does this end up breaking down and sellers take complete control and you can go fill the gap potentially, or do we get bid and trade back into at least this? Now we're trading back into it's like 280s, right? Which puts you at the sort of the lower end of this bulk of the balance. So I think tomorrow that's gonna be my main focus. do not think I want it trading too much lower. It's a little tricky with gaps like this over a long weekend. Equity markets aren't open. It's just the futures markets that are open for half a session. I don't think there's enough volume to really constitute us like really truly attempting to shift value up here. So we'll have to see what happens RTH up against some of these levels. I don't think I'm going to change any of the levels. So we're going to stay put. Just say if we do get a deep enough pullback, I would think Friday's highs have to hold. Ideally, we don't have to see that, and then we can sort of work up against this like 21,280s. If not, yeah, maybe I think you got a chance to be short up against it back towards probably this 170s and then maybe even Friday's highs. I think that's where I'm at in terms of ES and NQ in the chart itself. It kind of did last night exactly what I wanted to see. Unfortunately, I couldn't get involved because I was away. But I will just take that into consideration and sort of just continue being bullish if we're going to be above levels. I think that's about it. Crude, don't really see like a great setup. Copper, we played the long Friday. Still looks pretty okay for a continued breakout. Maybe worth continuing to watch. I know we got FCX and longs and FCX calls. Gold, I think, fell a little yesterday. Not really interested in playing that one. So I'll stick with the S and NQ for the most part. We got NVIDIA earnings this week. Probably the most important thing going on this week, aside from any random headlines we might get. And I believe Avgo the following week, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so two big ones. This is what, Wednesday after the close? Yeah, but it'll probably dictate where we go for the rest of the week. I don't think we have data this week, do we? At least anything important? Or we have minutes, huh? Is that next week? Minutes, GDP on Thursday. Jobless claims Thursday. Okay, Thursday will be big too. And PC Friday. Don't think those should be too big of a deal, except for GDP might be. Obviously, NVIDIA is the first big one. Do I know where it's going? Heck no. I still think continue to be long. Well, my larger time frame macro thesis is still rates higher for longer, risk on bonds down, and specifically I'm still long a lot of IGV. Yeah, moved some of the position over to XLF, not XL Energy. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, so with the long risk and my idea is sort of we go and we continue in this like growth period. You're definitely late stage, in the growth period, but my only big question is what's the reaction going to be when bonds inevitably blow up, right? Because you're you're at a point where I think central banks around the world screwed up already. They're just complete ignorance, I guess. Uh, yeah, it's a big issue. We'll see what the reaction is to that, whatever it may be. That was the weekly, or I guess that's the outlook. Any questions?